Today's rally is part of an international struggle to secure the freedom of Julian Assange, to defend WikiLeaks, and to fight against all forms of censorship and the attacks on an independent and critical media. It is a crucial struggle for the working class because it is part of the greater struggle for all of the social and democratic rights of the vast mass of humanity. Internationally, we live in days where a powerful mass movement of workers is developing. After decades in which workers have been suppressed, they are coming forward in powerful waves of strike action and political protest against the assault on their wages, their healthcare, their education, and their right to a healthy and safe environment. Workers and young people are also becoming increasingly aware of the danger of war in these times when an American president speaks casually about using nuclear weapons to totally destroy entire countries. You cannot understand the determination of the American ruling elite and its state to silence WikiLeaks and silence Julian Assange without an understanding of their fear of the working class and the ordinary people. They are terrified of the power that the internet provides to the working class. It gives them the ability to access alternate analysis, alternate news, the ability to exchange information, exchange opinion, and it enables them to unite and organise across national borders. Julian Assange explained this very well in the statement he sent to our publication, the World Socialist website, endorsing an online forum that the WSWS held on January 16th this year. Julian Assange wrote, "While the internet has brought about a revolution in people's ability to educate themselves and others, the resulting democratic phenomenon has shaken existing establishments to their core. Google, Facebook and their Chinese equivalents, who are socially, logistically and financially integrated with existing elites, have moved to re-establish discourse control." Now, the means by which the ruling elites are seeking to re-establish discourse control, referred to by Julian, is by trying to destroy the hard-won democratic rights of the working class and to silence and censor the internet. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are one of the principal oppositional voices in the world today. He is being persecuted by the US, British and Australian governments because they are hostile to everything that WikiLeaks represents. From its establishment in 2006, the mission of WikiLeaks was to provide whistleblowers who had knowledge of criminal conduct by governments, state agencies and corporations, to provide them the means to let you know about it. WikiLeaks guaranteed that leaks would be published without fear or favour, without vetting, and through the power of the internet, made available to the entire world. As most of you know, in 2010, WikiLeaks was entrusted by a courageous whistleblower in the US military who wanted to let the world know the full extent of the crimes that were being committed against the people of Afghanistan and the people of Iraq. Tens of millions around the world watched in horror and outrage the collateral murder video published by WikiLeaks, which showed the US helicopter gunship massacring unarmed civilians, including 2 Reuters journalists. WikiLeaks was further entrusted by that whistleblower to publish hundreds of thousands of US diplomatic cables, which reveal how American diplomats around the world engage every day in sordid anti-democratic intrigues to assert the US strategic interests and the profit interests of American companies. Chelsea Manning, formerly Private Bradley Manning, spent close to 7 years of his life in a prison cell for making those courageous leaks which WikiLeaks published. In this country, we learnt from those diplomatic cables that an entire cabal within the Australian Labor Party government were what the US Embassy classifies as its, quote, protected sources. That is, the people who keep Washington informed and do Washington's bidding. The people identified as US operatives in the Labor Party were those who played the key factional role in ousting Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister, including current Labor Party leader Bill Shorten. The Obama administration wanted Rudd out because he wouldn't line up fast enough with the US build-up preparations for a military confrontation with China. His replacement, Julia Gillard, had no hesitation about lining up with Washington. And we can look back now on the momentous events of 2010 with the benefit of hindsight. It is now clear why the Labor government of Julia Gillard denounced the publication of US military and diplomatic leaks by WikiLeaks as, quote, illegal activity. It is clear why the Labor Party government at the time immediately declared that it would not defend Assange, but instead would assist Washington to prosecute him. The Labor government was in the process of aligning Australia fully with US plans for an economic and military offensive to try and prevent China emerging as a rival or a challenge to American and Australian strategic and corporate influence in Asia. Labor, no less than Obama's administration, was hostile to WikiLeaks, hostile to an organisation that fiercely published leaked information that exposed the conspiracies and intrigues and the underlying predatory nature of the US-Australia military alliance. In November 2011, after throwing Julian Assange to the wolves, Julia Gillard and Labor committed Australia to the US pivot to Asia, the stationing of US Marines in Darwin, and massive increased operations by US aircraft and ships from Australian bases. Her government set in motion a massive Australian military build-up, committing tens of billions to be spent on jet fighters, submarines and other warfighting assets. That is why Australian officials did nothing to assist Julian Assange as he fought through the British courts against manufactured allegations of sexual assault and the warrant to extradite him to Sweden, from where he could have been rapidly extradited onto the United States. Julian Assange was only forced to seek political asylum with the small South American country of Ecuador because the government of his own country threw him to the wolves. The coalition government that replaced Labor in 2013 continued and has expanded Canberra's alignment with Washington. And that is why it too has supported the ongoing persecution of Assange and WikiLeaks. In 2016, the coalition government refused to even issue a protest to Britain when the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention ruled that Assange's involuntary confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy in London was a, quote, deprivation of liberty and a, quote, violation of his human rights. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop instead signed a document which declared the following, that Australia was, quote, unable to intervene in the due process of another country's court proceedings or legal matters, And then she said, and we have full confidence in the UK and Swedish judicial system. This was a lie. The Australian government had at the time, in 2010, and it still has today, the undeniable diplomatic power and legal discretion under international and national law to intervene to defend an Australian citizen who is being unjustly treated by another government. In the case of Julian Assange, the issue is that the Australian government is refusing to exercise that diplomatic power and that legal discretion. It is instead supporting Washington's vendetta to have Assange hauled to the United States and put on a show trial on charges of espionage. Now, at this rally, we are not asking Malcolm Turnbull to act on behalf of Julian Assange. We are telling him. We hold the Labor Party and the coalition parties responsible for all the outrages and harm that have been inflicted on Julian Assange, and we will hold them responsible for whatever happens to him now. They will be held to account by the working class of Australia. What is the situation as Julian Assange faces immense danger? The entire establishment has lined up against him because they have lined up completely with the US-Australia alliance. There is no criticism anymore in Australia of the alliance. No criticism of the fact that Pine Gap is where the United States targets its nuclear and cruise missiles. There is no criticism of the fact that Edward Snowden, backed by WikiLeaks, exposed that Australian intelligence agencies are up to their eyeballs in the global spying on the communications of hundreds of millions of people. And there is no criticism, no even discussion in ruling circles on the fact that in the US and Australian military and strategic circles, they are openly talking about preparing a war against China. We have come together today in the face of total silence, not just from the Coalition and Labor, but from the Greens, from Andrew Wilkie, from the trade unions, from the entire pseudo-left milieu in this country. They have lined up with Washington, so they have lined up in the efforts to break Julian Assange. The situation we face today is that if you dare even criticise the US alliance, it's considered tantamount to treason. While the establishment is silent on the persecution of an Australian citizen, the Australian political and media establishment is stoking up a nationalist and xenophobic witch hunt against purported Chinese interference and Chinese influence in Australia. The reality, of course, is the constant interference and influence over Australian politics by the United States, by the ruling class of the United States. The World Socialist website and my party have stressed from the beginning, when we announced this rally some weeks ago, that a movement to defend Julian Assange is not going to be built by making appeals to the organisations who have abandoned him. It will be built by a fight to politically educate and independently mobilise the strength of the working class, the strength of ordinary people. What must be explained, and it must be explained to workers and young people, is that the attack on Assange, the attack on WikiLeaks, the attack on an independent media is an attack on them. The persecution of Julian Assange is a sharp expression of the campaign to censor and silence all opposition to social inequality, to state repression, and to the danger of war. The international fight to defend democratic rights and defeat internet censorship and defend Assange and WikiLeaks are inseparable from and crucial to the fight to unite the people, the working class internationally, against the danger of war. It is only through the unity of the working class, not the division of workers by racial or ethnic criteria, that democratic rights can be defended and the broader interests of the working class taken forward. To conclude, over the past 3 weeks, as we have promoted this rally and the vigils, important vigils which will be taking place on June 19th in London and numbers of other cities, we have revealed the extent of the support for Assange and WikiLeaks that exists in the working class in Australia and internationally. The establishment may have abandoned Julian Assange. Millions of ordinary people have not. What the Turnbull government does now, what the Labor Party does now, at this time when Julian Assange faces immense danger, is not going to be forgotten. From this rally, we have to turn out even more energetically to develop the widest discussion on the situation that faces Julian in the workplaces and factories, at the universities and TAFE colleges, and among the students in the high schools. We have to answer the continuous slanders and continuous lies that are told about him. Julian Assange must be free to unconditionally return to Australia if he chooses to do so, and WikiLeaks must be free to continue unhindered its work. I commit today that the Socialist Equality Party will continue to fight for that cause. Thank you.